I'm Rosenbaum. When I started working exclusively in digital and generative art, I was asked the question, where does the work lie in a digital artwork? When does it become real? And I've pondered that question constantly. I come from a traditional painting background, and my 3D modeling has gone from being my reference material to being at the forefront of my creative practice. In painting, the question's simple. The work's real when you paint it, and you hang it up. But for a digital work, is it real when it's in the computer, or only when it's printed? The capabilities of new media are so much greater than a static painting or sculpture, and we need to be able to address this, to move beyond the traditional notions of art in a whiteboard space. This is my attempt to move beyond a print on the wall, where I feel the figure has been nailed like a lifeless butterfly, to a different space altogether, allowing that viewer to enter their world, if only a little. Augmented reality is the solution I happened on. We can look to the physical work on the wall, to the work on the screen, and we can see it come to life inside our phones. We can see it exists in a 3D plane, in a digital world of its own, a world where we are starting to be able to teach computers how to think and how to create art for themselves. My work examines gender through the lens of computer vision, using machine learning, 3D modeling, and augmented reality to explore non-binary transness in a binary medium. My explorations of gender and identity are central to me as a non-binary trans artist. Hidden Worlds explores how computers see us. We live in an age where identity can be simulated easily, where believable celebrities can be imagined whole by a computer, and faces can be stolen, where our eyes can be easily tricked. But what about artistic modes of computer vision and creation? Image classifiers give us clues into computer modes of perception, but sometimes their solutions are mystifying. I want to explore that space in between, where art and technology meet. I want to explore gender as it's created and perceived by computers. I began this series of works with a generative adversarial network. A GAN takes a data set of images and learns to make its own based on what it sees. The generator makes the work while a discriminator judges it based on the source material. As the discriminator passes more works and fails others, the generator learns to make more works that pass the test. And in this way, in this case, I was going for a more abstract feel, so my data set was quite small. It was only 16,000 images of Greek and Roman statuary. The nature of curation and critique is a constant recurring theme with generative art and using GANs. The artist curates a data set of thousands of images for the machine to work with. The discriminator critiques the result of the generator. I curate and critique the results that pass the discriminator. While curating a data set, I find myself slipping into a meditative state. I become the discriminator of this series of photographs as I prepare them. I see the photographs and cut the ones that don't fit. I find myself daydreaming of what I hope the results will be. I know the generator and the discriminator don't daydream, but it's easy to imagine that they do, that the works that come out are so dreamlike, they're undefined, but gaining in definition and resolve as the machine learns. You don't have much control of what the machine will generate past that. Working with generative art is also an exercise in learning to let go. But the results in the end came close to what I'd hoped to find. I found myself hoping for bodies missing limbs, reflecting the amount of broken statuary, and figures blending gender characteristics. I wanted to create new, unidealized sculptures for those of us who never got to see ourselves realized as gods. Once the dataset was complete, I started the weeks of training of the neural network. I'd load the images as they were generated in the latent space of training and watch as it learned. Sifting through these images for ones that inspired me was another exercise in curation. And I watched as the concept evolved in my head. I took some of my favorites and started to draw into them on my iPad, just testing out ideas while I waited. I knew what I wanted to say, but not quite how I'd say it. Finally, I started to watch as the network collapsed. It started to create the same images over and over as the generator decided only one image would truly satisfy the discriminator. Being a small data set, the results were still abstract, but open to interpretation. The generated works were exactly as expected. They were abstract and rough, but with recognizably human shapes. As the data set was extremely idealized, it was a delight to see such exaggerated bodies and delightful curves emerge, works beyond what I'd expected to find. I delighted in the textures and the shapes that I saw emerging. I selected my favourites and made drawings of what I saw in the works, the figures emerging within the abstract forms, and from those drawings I made 3D models, and from those models I made augmented reality interactions. While close, you see something abstracted, but as you move back, it resolves into something more tangible and real. Like with pointillism and cubism, you can appreciate the details close. It's only until you step back and take in the entire work that the forms start to resolve into something more than the sum of their parts. It also reflects the training process of the works, the slow coming into being of certain forms. Some final artwork stood well with just the drawings saved as animations, and some felt best with 3D models attached. I also trained a neural network that specialized in writing captions for images in more poetic language, to turn captions into short stories so that it could write a narrative about the works created by the GAN and the works created by me in response. It would detect features in the image, then create a short caption, and then write a narrative about the caption. The results for this were random but fascinating, often only tangentially related to the subject, but with a soft romance to the phrasing that I found compelling. The images and the different 3D models were submitted to the narrative writer, which created passages of generated text. I did some minor edits on the text and had a text-to-speech synthesizer speak the words. It felt important to have digital voices as the narrators of these works, and I feel particularly pleased with how the gender of the subject flips around almost at random. The gender of the people in these works feels fluid, and I'm obscurely proud of the machine that it saw that and produced these gender-fluid results. From here, I united them all together in unity. The spoken word, music based on the generated words, and the interactions, captions, and the options to turn off the sound were added and submitted to the different app stores. This series for me is a true collaboration between my computer and myself. The art is generated by machine with the information I provided it. I then worked back into its results and submitted them back to the machine to see its interpretation of my interpretation. Back and forth we'd go, creating work, creating art based on that work, a mini collective of two. I'm obsessed with the potential for machine learning and augmented reality in art, for collaborating with computers and handheld devices and headsets to add layers onto this world pixel by pixel, to blur the line between the digital and real, and to explore new concepts in a post-digital age. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm going to keep it short today. For those who I haven't met or haven't come across me today, I'm one of the staff members in digital media at RMIT. I get a lot of chance to talk about my work. There's a lot of people here who get less chance, so I'll just keep it brief. I'll be around all day. I'm happy to speak more later. The work that I'm showing today up the back corner there is the Google alphabet, something I've been playing around with recently, basically scraping this guy here, the Google search, for the suggestions we get, typing in the Roman in English alphabet, A, B, C, so on. Noticing the fairly obvious thing, which probably all of you have experienced in some way, that the suggestions you get are a bit different to the phonetic alphabet or the way people would have learnt the alphabet, at least beyond A is for Apple. The version that's running here today is set up to run with Google from Australia, and so there are some what I would see as saving graces. A is for ABC News rather than Amazon, like when you search Google US or lots of others. There are a lot of searches that are quite stable. A lot of the letters, the first suggestions you'll get for Google seem to remain pretty stable. It runs live, scraping, and so gives this chance to just see what Google gives you. And so it's a lot of predictable ones. G is for Google, E is for eBay, F is for Facebook, and so on. Then there are some that are a bit more volatile, and that obviously depends on a whole lot of different things. You get N is for news, W is for weather, but you know, if there's some sort of particular event, M is for Melbourne weather at the moment after the last few days, which it wasn't before. Doing some tests last night for today. C has become for cricket score now that the summer has fired up in Australia. And I'm interested in this because really my principal interest is auditory culture, but that's gradually ballooned out, and there's no sound in the work, but of course it's about how we communicate, how we deal with language. And really, I think the internet a lot of the time has replaced or augmented the oral culture that we've had for a very long time. You know, a lot of what were conversations we had using voices, or at least a lot of people, are now conversations that are had online and using these tools. And I'm quite interested in this idea that we actually know the languages in which we speak differently now because of how we use this technology. And it's easy to say, well, you know, it's because of Google and what Google does. And Google's quite obscure about how those suggestions are decided. It obviously depends on what people search for, but it also depends on paid advertising and things like that. But at the same time, this is a feedback network, obviously. You know, it's based on things people are searching for, what we're concerned about. And I go a bit deeper through that list. L is for LinkedIn, R is for real estate. It's a very telling list that we get. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Richie. I just need to get my magic jacket before I start, so... Okay, that feels better. Okay, so I have a piece here called Urban Oracle, which is just there. And I'm going to talk a bit about my work, and I'm going to talk about mostly this piece, not much about other things, but I'm happy to answer questions. And I think we'll start with a kind of improvised PowerPoint presentation using Google. Okay. Can you? Is this working? No? Okay. This one? Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So this is, it's called Urban Oracle, but another word for it, or title, alternative title, might be psychic pirate Wi-Fi. So, I mean, we're going to use Google Images and find out find a good image to use while I talk about psychic Wi-Fi. I mean, hacking Wi-Fi password easily is pretty nice. Dark site, I don't know. This one's pretty cool. I have no idea what it is. But okay, psychic reads my mind. Okay, so has anyone had a chance to look at the piece yet? Yeah, a couple of people. Okay, I have some notes here. I'll just help me remember what I want to talk about. Okay, so pirate, psychic, Wi-Fi, or Urban Oracle, let's kind of break that down a little bit. So here we have what I guess we refer to as the umbilical, or the feed that comes, you know, that we're all connected to all the time. Does anyone have a phone today? That's good. We'll use them later. Okay, so we're connected to this source provided for us by the information overlords that you're all aware of, Google, Apple. You know, I don't need to probably explain this stuff, especially to this audience. And it's difficult to disconnect from this umbilical, and made increasingly difficult by the technology that they provide. So, what I might do. There we go. Okay. So I don't know. I'm sort of coming back into this like academic presentation, which is already kind of boring me. So What we're going to do is kind of focus on this icon for a little bit, which just sort of summarises the piece, the psychic pirate Wi-Fi. And I would like you to take out your devices, please, and we're going to do some technical walkthrough of the piece. So I think Nick handed out these cards, and there's more here. Does anyone need one? I'm going to talk about I'm going to lead you through the instructions, so you don't need to bother with the card. So that's a good...
It's your lucky day.
Yeah, it's your lucky day. So does your phone have Wi-Fi capability?
It's like a really old BlackBerry button.
Okay, well let's find out. It's interesting. So basically what this piece over here is a shrine, and it's a Wi-Fi hotspot. And see, these figures doing the ceremony have been focusing outwards to the audience, but I'm going to turn them inwards as we focus on the shrine. It should be an interesting process to see how many of us can connect to it, and if we're going to crash it, we'll see what happens. So basically, it's its own node. It's not connected to the internet. So what you're doing when you find it is you're disconnecting from the internet or the umbilical and connecting into this. Yeah. So some of you have found it already. The Wi-Fi network's pretty obvious. It's called The Oracle is Listening. And so what I want you to do is to think about your engagement with this spiritual node that's sitting there, and possibly, we know we're not seeing all of it, because there's all of this electromagnetic energy and that's powering it. There's the microwaves that are the Wi-Fi receivers. And so what you need to do is you need to connect to that network, and depending on what device you're on, it might throw up all kinds of different errors, or it might let you straight in. So my experience is with iOS is that it's the most locked down, and this part of this piece is kind of about exploring the boundaries and limitations of that we're provided by these technological overlords. So has anyone tried using iOS and getting kicked out?
I've gotten the browser notification there that you wrote with the colour shifting background.
Okay, cool. So if you get the notification, then you need to go to cancel, which is super counterintuitive, and then it brings up a little thing that says, what does it say exactly? Thanks, Ange. Use without internet, and it's red. Okay, we don't like hitting red things or pressing cancel, but let's do both of those things, cancel and use without internet. Okay, and then it should connect to the network. Now, there's nothing I can do in terms of my hacking about this basic Apple kind of interface. There's no. I mean, I'm not a genius hacker, but without sort of taking over the operating system, I've got to sort of follow through those steps. So I found that Android. So if you've got a tick, you should be able to go to your browser, and then in the URL field, what you need to do is, and this is where we want to focus kind of on the Oracle, focus internally, feel the sort of energy of the shrine that's sort of moving up, below, around the entire thing and permeating into your souls. So did you have a question? Did you get it up? Yeah, okay.
I'm just vibrating.
Yeah.
Vibration.
Cool. So you need to think of a question that you want to ask the Oracle, something that you want to know about yourself. Generally, a lot of these, I've been reading a bit of Jodorowsky on tarot recently, and he talks about how it's really this deep technology for learning about yourself. It's not really about fortune telling, for example. So when you form the question, you have to form it in the as a URL. So a mashup of words, they can have full stops in between them or underscores, and then it needs to end in a web suffix. So when I'm using the Oracle, if I want to know about people, for example, I might use the suffix .org, or if I want to know about, how I'm going to do financially, I might put in .biz, or, about my great stardom, .tv, whatever it is that you're sort of, you can think about these web suffixes as a kind of a marker. And then when you hit enter, it should load your reading. So if you're getting the internet, you need to go back to the settings and choose. It means it's kicked you out. It has a tendency, so particularly Apple, but all these devices are kind of unique, but Apple has a tendency to just kick you out, especially if you are using the SiteWorks Wi-Fi. It's like, oh no, I found a Wi-Fi that's connected to the internet so I can track you, so I'm going to put you back on that and take you off the Oracle. But we want to persist and stay in the Oracle. And if you turn your phone's landscape view, you'll get a better read of those cards. And so Oracle cards, if you're familiar or not familiar, as it's a tarot type technology, but not traditional tarot suits and symbolism. So you'll see, so you can interpret the reading based on the order of the symbolism. You can look at the specific symbols within the cards, which are built from sort of ironically, the umbilical. And some of you have also discovered there's a little sort of Easter egg button on there, which I encourage you to find and press, and then turn up the sound on your device. And then you could even start to roam around the room and see, sort of just feel that, connection to the Oracle and how the question resonates and how the answer resonates with you. Yeah, I'm hearing some Oracle sounds, which I'm enjoying. Thank you. And hopefully you're, finding the answers that you seek. Does anyone need some technical assistance on connecting, or are we mostly good? You need some help? Okay, so you just need to go to your settings and find the Wi-Fi networks. The Oracle is listening. And if it tells you not to, don't listen to it. Go choose cancel and choose yes, connect without internet. And feel free to roam around and feel the connection between you and the Oracle. Oh yes, so you can, if you ask another question, for example, once you're connected and you feel that you've got the most out of the reading that you need to get, then you can ask another question and it will load another reading for you. I've mostly finished talking. I'm happy to answer questions, but I wouldn't mind if we just spend a couple of minutes just playing around with it, and I'll just shut up.
I've had a couple of guys. It seems to throw me out always after one. I have to redo it. I try and take that off, but it works fine. That's How Will I Die, which I'm totally comfortable with. How Will I Die?
Oh, nice.
Alright. It's good. It's quite reassuring.
Alright, we're running over time, so feel free to keep connecting during the day. Thanks.
Hi. So, yes, I don't have any visuals or anything. I'm here to talk about my sound production. And yeah, so it's quite sort of strange for me to be here and be talking about this because I've done internet music for quite a long time, but I kind of always thought of myself as a public servant with weird hobbies and not someone that actually has a practice or actually does something that anyone else would care about. Anyway, so this is quite strange being up here and talking about this. Yes, so I make internet music, and more recently I've kind of gotten involved in the vaporwave community. And vaporwave, for people who don't know, is like this sample-based music style that kind of appropriates junk culture into these sort of dreamy, nostalgic soundscapes. And I sort of working within this community and working within this medium, I've sort of found that being a person that's been working in forums and talking to people about stuff for a long time, I started to get interested in the way that there were all of these kind of interruptions that I didn't ask for, kind of being jammed in my face, increasingly sort of going from, you know, back working with people over MySpace, where at the start, you know, it was just people talking to each other, or at least it felt like that, and now kind of working with people through Twitter and stuff, and I feel like you're constantly kind of getting like harassed by advertising that you didn't ask for, and you're being like bashed by, you know, promoted posts that you don't want that for some reason they think that you're interested in, or all of these things, and all of these things keep kind of invading space. And so in this idea of kind of like working with junk culture, I kind of am fascinated with the idea of, rather than sort of ignoring these things and blocking them out and trying to filter them and get rid of them, to try and like kind of roll around in them. When I was a kid, I remember that there was this, that I was watching a documentary on, I think it was the ABC, about the Sex Pistols. I know that they're quite problematic now, but there was this quote from one of them when he was talking about the garbage collectors strike, and he said, if you know, people who say that they're engaging with the garbage collectors strike, you know, they're not engaging with it unless they're like rolling around in it and seeing how they smell afterwards. And so I've always sort of thought of that as kind of a funny way to think about things. And so in terms of engaging with the garbage that the internet keeps forcing into my face, rather than try and get rid of it, I find myself more and more trying to like capture as much of it, the audio from it as much as possible. So kind of plugging my phone into like an audio interface and like recording the audio from bad ads and terrible videos and things that, like, you know, I should be ignoring because they're actually getting in the way of what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I thought, well, what if I'm supposed to be doing this instead? And with that as well, working with, I suppose, working in kind of vaporwave, a lot of the stuff, a lot of people within the community, they pull their samples out of YouTube. And I have a very odd relationship with YouTube, so I also kind of, I borrow my material from YouTube and rip it out of there using, say, like one of those downloader things. Anyway, but I also find like me and YouTube, we kind of collaborate in this way where YouTube's also kind of like the holder of my weirdest, dirtiest, darkest secrets of the way that I waste my time when nobody else is watching. And so when in my recommendations, as well as like it recommending things to me that are the things that I might want to make music out of, you know, it's also conscious of the fact that I have an unhealthy obsession with juggalo culture, and I unironically find it interesting, or that like I spend a lot of time trying to figure out, you know, why the alt-right is so good at destroying the modern world, so I just smash these video marathons of all this terrible garbage, trying to figure out why, and all of these things start to kind of filter into my YouTube feed, which is where I go to kind of find things to make music out of, and I end up with this kind of horrible mishmash where, oh, the other thing I love is SoundCloud rappers, and particularly I love SoundCloud rappers, the compilations of their Snapchats, anyway, which is important to this next part of the story. And so I like to sort of like, when I'm going to make music, I kind of live in this world where, you know, my feed on YouTube will have this video of, I don't know if anyone's seen it, where Little Pump's got like an AR-15 in his mouth and he's jumping backwards listening to trap music and he hits his head on the wall. Anyway, it's a thing. And that'll be kind of sitting next to some horrible thing Jordan Peterson said, which will be sitting next to some video about beauty pageants at like the Gathering of the Juggalos and so forth and so on. Anyway, and so I kind of I started to get obsessed with there's all this like crap. And like a lot of it's very representative of who I am, even though I've told a room full of people, it's stuff that most people, except for Google and YouTube, don't really know about me. And so they're going, no, well, what if I start sort of jamming with YouTube? If YouTube tells me you should watch this, I'll go watch it and I'll start like pulling audio out of it and kind of jamming it together into this sort of, these kind of weird kind of audio collages, which is kind of, I suppose, taking the spirit of interruption and disruption and kind of like mangling it all together. So taking pieces of the advertising I didn't ask for, you know, and the juggalo stuff that I shouldn't be asking for, and kind of try and find this kind of like, this sort of like map of, there's a, Frederick Jameson talks about, and there's actually an article about vaporwave by Alec and Koch, and in this article they talk about how vaporwave is this way of psychologically mapping the mediascape that we live in late capitalism. And so in a way, that's kind of, I guess, what it's become for me, that I'm kind of interacting with these algorithms that are trying to predict what garbage they can force into my face, or what recommendations, you know, I should be interested in YouTube. And the more I kind of engage with these things, it's kind of this weird kind of manifestation of who I am and my quirks, and all of my proclivities, I suppose. But it also kind of becomes this feedback loop where the more I kind of roll around in it, like the Sex Pistols said with the garbage, you know, the more it kind of like feeds into this, yes, that is who you are, so here's something even weirder and more dark that you probably shouldn't watch, and I'll go, yes, I do want to watch that, and it just keeps kind of rolling and rolling and rolling and trying to kind of fold that up into making music. Yeah, and that, I guess, is my practice as a weird public servant with strange hobbies. So, thank you.
I just really liked your talk. Adrian? Yes. Yeah. Which work is yours? It's outside. Yeah. Is yours a sound, like the DJ set?
Yeah, the sound was playing for the first half of lunch.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just checking.
Yeah.
I was like, I really like your talk. Yeah.
And he will be playing in the dinner break as well, a bit later as well.
I just had another question for Adrian. First of all, like, don't be ashamed of your love of jugglers. Like, no, but like really. I'm just interested to hear what role nostalgia plays in your own work. You know, like, I guess vaporwave always gets talked about with nostalgia a lot, but what you just said kind of made me realize about, like, it's a reflection of the platforms that tend to reflect nostalgia rather than that. I just wanted to, like, how you felt about representing nostalgia in your own practice.
Sure. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure that I am nostalgic. I think that if anything, what I am nostalgic for is this idealized time in my head, you know, when MySpace was around and before it got ruined, and when SoundCloud, I feel like, I basically live on the internet. So like when SoundCloud was around and it hadn't been ruined, and when MySpace was around and it hadn't been ruined, and I guess what I'm nostalgic for is this idea that there was, well, at least in my head, there was this time in the internet when I could actually connect with people without it kind of being some kind of corporatized kind of money grab of people sort of like trying to siphon my data off to turn it into something valuable for them. And I guess my music isn't very nostalgic. I guess I probably should have played some, but I didn't. I'll play some out there anyway. Rather than being nostalgic, I guess it's kind of angry. I don't know if you know the artist Fire Tools. If you don't, you should definitely look her up. She's amazing. Fire Tools' stuff is more kind of, it takes nostalgia and it looks at kind of how it's being interrupted, and she kind of is very angry about that. And I guess my kind of thing, my music is sort of very much kind of like about trajectory and this sort of pushing forward and this kind of like this restlessness. And I guess I kind of like try to focus on like how our nostalgia is kind of being siphoned away from us. So I guess it's kind of like anti-vaporwave in a sense. I sort of started with kind of being interested in nostalgia and then realised that I feel like the things I'm nostalgic for are being kind of interrupted, and started to focus now on the interruptions more so than trying to get back to the place before that. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
Well, I have a quick question for Jay, if no one else has a question or comment. It's just, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. I liked how you described the meditative way of how you do your database editing, and I wondered, I think it's a really nice kind of embodied account, and I wondered if you wanted to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, okay.
Even though we've got no time.
I'll keep it short. Thanks. No, so because you're dealing with so very, very many images, you can't look at each one individually. You've got to kind of take them as a whole, and you've got to sort of sit back and go, no, yes, no, and it becomes this quite a fast thing. Your brain's working and your hands are working, but the front of your brain isn't. You know, you're just sort of off listening to your music, doing whatever, you know. and thinking about what you want to see in the end. But the process of sorting these images, it would be very tedious otherwise. If I didn't slip into that state, it would be very dull. Oh no, that's a face. No, that's Minoan. That's not Greek. Sorry.
Thank you.